Welcome to Real Body Talk. I'm your host, Jennifer Kriatsulis. Perhaps you've heard the quote, comparison is the thief of joy. When it comes to feeling good in our skin, comparing our bodies to others can certainly take a toll, affecting our self-esteem, our sense of worth, how we perceive our bodies, and even contributing to body dysmorphic disorder. And certainly in this age of social media, we don't have to go far to find ourselves in compare and despair. To talk with me today about strategies to feel more confident in our bodies and compare less, I've invited Kristie Amadio, Director and Founder of Recovered Living. I'm super excited to have Kristie on this show. Not only is she a phenomenal human being and wonderful at the work that she does, but she's also traveled quite a way to be here. So I'm so appreciative. Thank you so much, Kristie, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, so these topics of body image and comparing our bodies to others, body dysmorphic disorder, why are these topics important to you?
They are so important to me, Jennifer. Mostly from my own personal experiences. I struggled with body dysmorphic disorder from a very young age. I think the earliest memory of that was somewhere around 8 or 10 years old. And body dysmorphic disorder, for anyone that's not aware of what it is, it's essentially when someone feels that parts of their appearance is defective or flawed in some way, and typically other people can't see that. And so it's almost like me telling you that this cup is blue, and you're like, no, it's white. And it's very difficult to be told that what you're seeing and what you're feeling isn't real. And it haunted me for a very, very long time. And it wasn't until probably the last few years where I've really found someone that could help me with it. And I went from a place of being concerned about my appearance, worrying about my appearance, really hiding away from the world in certain ways, to being completely free and at ease in my body. And I think body image is such a topic out there in the world today, particularly with social media, that it's really something that's close to my heart. And I think we're still working on finding better strategies, better therapies, better ways of dealing with body image in our culture and in our society.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And I'm so happy, sincerely happy, that you can sit here today and say, and I feel freedom and at ease in my body.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's no small thing.
Thank you.
Right?
Yeah.
So celebrating that is important. Can you share with me about what you do with your clients in terms of body image and body dysmorphic disorder? You know, I know this is important to you personally, but I know this is part of your professional work as well now.
Absolutely. And so I often say to people, if you want to be dissatisfied, compare. And so I think today, particularly in social media, people are, they're really held up in high esteem for how they look. And in all the women's kind of magazines that you see out there in the grocery store, it's all about how to lose weight, how to get a toned stomach, how to get a thigh gap, like all these things that I feel like 100 years ago, if you said thigh gap to someone, they wouldn't know what we were talking about. And so it's very, I think even for someone like myself that has a healthy self-esteem and a healthy body image, it's still hard not to have feelings in today's society because we are bombarded with it. We see it everywhere. We hear it everywhere. I'm hard pressed to go to a restaurant these days and not hear someone talking about that they don't eat this or they're on this diet or they shouldn't eat this because of whatever. And so I think we are just bombarded by it today. So typically when I'm talking with clients, we're talking about what they're allowing to kind of flood their senses, or sorry, how do I say that? We're really talking with clients about what they're being exposed to in the world and how much they're letting that in and how much they're letting that integrate into their value system, what they talk about, and even what they surround themselves with. So I'm a big advocate for doing a clean out of your social media. And so if there's people that you follow on social media that you find yourself comparing to, and you're comparing in a way that makes you feel not great about yourself, then maybe those people need to go. Maybe not forever, but for right now, it's like, let's turn your attention away from the people you're comparing with and let's put your attention on things that lift you up.
Absolutely. What do you, I mean, comparison is so far reaching, right? We're talking about it in terms of body image. But can you share a little bit about, you know, maybe your experience or what you hear clients talking about, like when they are comparing themselves, what's the language that's being used, or what was the language that you used to hear?
It's such a great question. I really want to separate that out into two different two different streams. I think for someone who has body image issues around, maybe they don't have great self-esteem, maybe they're like, my legs are too big or they're too small or whatever, typically it's a lot of comparing, and they've got an ideal about what they think their body should be like. My body should be like this. And really, you're fighting nature. Like, I've never heard anyone say, like, my humerus should be longer. I've never heard it. It's like, and that's often something that I'll reflect back. It's like it's concentrated on certain areas of our bodies that are lifted up in the media, but no one's ever said, I want a shorter forearm or I want a longer forearm. That just doesn't happen. And so there's a lot of comparison for people, I think, with body image challenges. When we get into BDD or body dysmorphic disorder, it's more, the language that they use is very, wait, I need a word. It's a language that's kind of shocking. So some of the words I might hear is, I'm grotesque, I look like an alien, I'm a freak. So it's very strong language that even if someone, say, had a facial trauma or had some sort of disfigurement on their body from a trauma or birth disfigurement, they wouldn't describe themselves as being an alien or being a freak. They'd be like, yeah, I got burnt in a fire and this is the result. But someone with body dysmorphic disorder will be very, very pointed and very specific languaging that I think the general public and even medical doctors, if they haven't really trained and studied in this area, can kind of be taken aback a bit. And it's like, wow, how do I approach this? Because it's so far out. And I think that's something that I love about the intricacy of working with people with body image challenges, is we can really start to dive into that.
Absolutely. So how do you, in your work, how do you help reflect back to clients that how to use your language, far out that language is, and help bring them back to a more centered place in their relationship with their body?
Absolutely. And I think I really want to answer that question from the
Please
two streams, because I think we've got a wide audience out here.
Yes.
So I think typically someone with body image challenges there's so many things that go into body image, because when we talk about body image, I think it's almost the wrong words to describe what we want, because it's not so much an image of ourselves. The image of ourselves makes up about 15% of our body image. So looking in the mirror, 15%. The other things that contribute to our body image are going to be experiences in life, both positive and negative. I think everyone's been bullied, but I think people have also been praised, like, you've got such straight teeth, or you're so athletic, and suddenly if your teeth start to become a little bit crooked, that happens with age, or maybe your body changes for whatever reason, and people in their minds, they had themselves in this esteem here, and all of a sudden if their body's changing, it's like, oh, part of my identity is changing, because I think part of our identity as human beings is wrapped up in what we look like. It's even the case with animals. They do like their little kind of mating dance. It's a thing. And so I totally lost my train of thought. What was I
Mating dances.
Mating dances. That's right. And so, no, I really did lose my train of thought.
Caught up in our appearance.
That's right, being caught up in our appearance. And so for someone with body dysmorphic disorder, we would definitely be... No, I'm sorry, I absolutely have lost it.
It's all good. It's all good. We were talking about how do we go from being, out here in our perception, right, and pulling it back to the more a more healthy perception.
And then
and you were sharing about how, as humans, we tend to be focused on our appearance, right? And you were kind of talking about the streams. The two streams there.
I'm nearly there. It's coming back.
It's all good. You can talk about whatever's on your mind right now. So how about we shift a little bit? It's all related. It's going to all circle back on itself.
Yeah.
How, in your own experience, if you don't mind sharing, did the body dysmorphic disorder, how did that affect all areas of your life?
Oh, it overshadowed everything. Everything from my self-esteem to what I would wear to even how I would stand in a social situation. So my body dysmorphic disorder, it started out with my legs. I remember being, I think I was probably around 8 or 10, and we're getting a school photo taken, and my best friend at the time was an elite gymnast, and I was sitting on the bleachers, and I remember as a kid looking at her legs and thinking to myself, like, why are my legs 3 times bigger than hers? Like, I was 8, and I look back at that photo today, and we're both twigs. Like,
right.
I look at it as an adult, and I'm like, what was I thinking? But I can still recall that image in my mind of my thighs being 3 times bigger than hers. And that happened several times throughout my childhood, where people would comment on, like, you know, oh, you're so tiny. And I remember just being confused and thinking, what are they talking about? And it really didn't connect as a problem, because in my mind I thought, well, it's just the truth. It's not like, it wasn't I didn't think that my thinking was a problem. I thought that I was the problem. And I think that's really the thing with body image challenges, is that people dogmatically believe that they are the problem, whereas actually it's the perception of themselves that's the problem.
Yes. Yeah.
And so how it began to impact me as I got older is I was an elite athlete in the sport of weightlifting, and I used to get a lot of comments on, like, how fit I looked and my stomach. And so I had that really positive experience of, like, oh, I have this identity because I look fit, because I have a flat stomach. And for whatever reason, because I have those internal attributes of being like a perfectionist, high standards, I'm sensitive, for whatever reason that took root, and it just became a wildfire really quickly. And so what would happen is I became obsessed with the idea of having a flat stomach, to the point that I would choose my clothes that, if I was having a bad day, that would be like tent-like and flowy to hide it. But if I was having a good day, then I would wear other sorts of clothes. When I was talking with someone, even though I could be having a conversation, in the back of my mind, it was, what does my stomach look like? What are they thinking about? I should stand side on so that they can't see it front. Like, it just overshadowed my entire day.
Wow.
And when I was in therapy, something my therapist asked me to do was to get one of those tally counters. And he said, every time you do a particular behavior, which is that I would tense my stomach muscles or suck my stomach in, I just want you to tally it, just so that we can see what we're working with. And I think for my therapist and I, we both thought that we'd probably be looking at, 30 to 40 times a day, and we could start to chip away at it. After about 3 hours, I think the tally was at about 6,000. Wow. And so we figured out that kind of every minute to minute and a half, this behavior was going on. And he said, Kristie, it's no wonder that this is such an issue for you, because you're literally overloading your system.
Yeah.
It was just constant. But thankfully, he had such a great attitude towards it, because he was like, if this is happening every 90 seconds, like, you've got so much scope to change this. It was a great way to look at it. It's like, if I spend 5 minutes a day on this, I'm making a significant impact.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so when people come to me with body image challenges or BDD, we really start to isolate what are some of the behaviors that you're doing, and they might be very, very subtle, like just touching your stomach, sucking it in, wearing certain clothes, certain colors, only eating certain things because they make you feel lighter, something like that. Thought processes, if you're around a certain person and you start comparing. So we can really isolate these behaviors and say, well, that's contributing to your body image. That's what I was talking about before.
Yes.
So with body image, 15% of when we look in the mirror, 15% of that is what makes up our body image, but there's so much more that contributes to that. So it's going to be the bullying, it's going to be being praised, it's going to be what we surround ourselves in our world. I really love John DeMartini. He does a lot of work on values, and I think typically when people talk about values, they'll write out a bunch of values and say, what values are important to you? And the way John Martini does it is completely backwards. He says, no, you can't just decide what your values are going to be. He says, look at your life and let's pull out the values that you're currently living, because people always live according to their values. And so John will get you to look at your life and say, okay, picture your bedroom. What's on the walls? What kind of pictures do you have? What fills your bookshelves? What's in your keepsake box? Because the things you surround yourself with is what's important to you. What do you talk about with people? What do you think about? What do you spend your money on? What do you spend your time doing? And for someone with body image challenges, a lot of what they surround themselves with may be body-related things, like fitness, for example, like pictures of people, their Instagram, their Facebook. All those types of things might subtly be related to body image. And so if they're surrounding themselves with things like that in the name of being fit, because in our society that's a virtuous thing to do, it can very quickly get distorted. Yeah.
So how do you start chipping away?
Great question.
What are some strategies that you can offer our viewers?
Yeah, it's a great question. So typically we'll look at, let's take the example of what's in your bedroom.
Yeah.
If people, let's say they are very passionate about being fit, I might drill into that a little bit more and say, okay, what part of that do you enjoy? Is it the say, for example, someone could be spending hours on the treadmill in a gym, or they could go for a hike in the mountains. And if they're going for a hike in the mountains, I can guarantee it's going to be the fresh air, being out in nature, being connected to wilderness. Those sort of things will lift them up. And so we'll start to get really specific about, are you going to the gym because you're wanting to look a certain way, or are you going to the gym, or are you going to work out or go on a hike because it makes you feel good? And so it's just subtly shifting your intention and your reasons for doing something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Our work so overlaps. So much of my work too is so intention-based, and thinking about, are we doing this behavior because it's managing, right? Whether that's a body image challenge, BDD, with my clients, an eating disorder, right? Or are we doing something that's healing?
Absolutely.
Right? Are we managing something, or are we healing something?
100%.
Right? And that uplift.
Yeah.
I love that you use that word. I use that word too.
Yeah, what lights your soul on fire?
Yeah. What uplifts you, right? And the reality is, so many of these thoughts and behaviors are so repetitive. Our brains have become so conditioned to them. Like what you were sharing with your personal story of the 6,000 clicks, right? Like your brain was just like right there on that neural pathway.
Sounds like a title of a book. 6,000 clicks.
Hey,
right? I know. I'm on it.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the difficulty too for people with body image challenges or body dysmorphic disorder is that because of the value placed on bodies in our society, is that a lot of people think that they should think this way, and so they don't think it's a problem.
That's right.
Or they think, well, I have to think this way because if I didn't, then what would happen to my body?
That's right. And we have the larger society, but then we have family systems. Right? And, I often say, our parents are part of the larger society, but we live with our parents, and this creates our own little society. So all the beliefs, all the values are getting, right? But certainly I'm sure you have clients who have told stories of, family beliefs around body and food. And those are so deeply ingrained.
Absolutely.
So deeply ingrained and so painful, often so painful.
Yeah.
Right? So what is your advice to, dealing with that, being within a family that maybe is very diet focused or weight focused or fitness focused in unhealthy ways?
Yeah, I actually had a client who had such an interesting family dynamic. Her father had a legitimate heart condition, and he'd been told by his doctors to eat clean and stay lean. And so he was very fastidious, and rightly so, about looking after his physical health. But my client had really interpreted that and taken it on for herself. And so in working with her, I had to speak with the family about, Dad gets to do what Dad gets to do because he has a legitimate heart condition. But that doesn't mean that as his daughter that you take that on. Like, you need to do something different because you're in recovery from an eating disorder and body image challenges. And so it was really about saying, it was hard for her to watch her dad going and exercising and not eating certain things. But it didn't mean that in order for her to recover that he had to do what she was doing, because they both had different journeys. He was doing what he was doing because of his heart, and she was doing what she had to do because of her head.
Yes.
Literally.
Yeah. Exactly. I feel so strongly that you don't have to have a diagnosis of any kind to struggle with body image challenges, right? I think this is something that everyone is a bit on a spectrum with.
Yeah. What I say to a lot of my clients is I say, because they'll say, but everyone talks about it. And I'm like, yeah, the world's gone crazy. I'm not going to deny it and say, because even when people say oh, go for what's important, what really matters? Well, what appears to really matter right now is body, because that's all we see out there.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I do say with a bit of a heavy heart, I think the world is a little misguided right now, and that's just the truth. And sometimes, honestly, the people that I feel most connected to and appear to be the most free with their bodies are people that have recovered from body image challenges, eating disorders, things like that, because I feel like they're the ones that really have done the hard, grungy type of work of getting to what really matters and being able to put aside what society cares about.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to pick your brain and just, while I have you here, what are some hands-on strategies that you can offer?
Yeah, I think something that's often people will say, well, just don't think about it. And it's really hard to do, particularly when body image is a felt sense.
Yeah, I don't think that works.
It doesn't really work. It doesn't work that well.
No.
And so distraction can be a part of a coping strategy. Like if you're feeling really down about yourself, you're like, I'm just going to stay inside all day, no one should see me. Like, no, please get out, go and distract yourself. But that's not going to work forever. That's putting a Band-Aid over a bullet wound.
Yeah.
And so something that people with body image challenges can really use to help themselves is refocusing their attention. So let's say someone is focused on, say their arms. They just feel like their arms aren't okay. And so typically, if I gave them a clicker and was like, I want you to click every time you think about your arms, they might be surprised and a little shocked at how often they're thinking about it. And so even, I'll give you a real concrete example. If someone's walking into the bathroom and the first thing they do when they look at the mirror is their eyes fall onto their arms. The way I like to describe that is imagine I want you to describe a tree outside your kitchen window. And if someone was to describe a tree, they'd be like, well, there's a brown trunk and it's green leaves, and it'd be fairly vague. But if I said to someone, I want you to describe your arms to me, they could tell me in intricate detail because they've spent so much time studying it. So typically when I'm working with people about retraining themselves to look in a mirror, they've trained themselves over and over to look in a mirror and all they see is their arms. But they couldn't even tell you maybe what shirt they're wearing because all they can focus on is their arms. And so I say to them, I want you to look at your body in the mirror like it's a tree. I want you to see the whole picture. And so maybe their first action is to walk in and their eyes immediately go to their arms. And then I say, you're not responsible for your first thought, but you are responsible for your second. Because those first thoughts have become very ingrained and value-based. But if you can retrain your second thought, which is, actually, I'm going to look at my hair, or I'm going to check out what's in the reflection on the wall behind of the mirror, you know, really just train your brain to look somewhere different, and then you slowly start to shift your values, because then your value becomes all of who you are rather than a certain aspect of yourself. Yeah. They've actually done some really interesting research in people with specifically BDD, and they found out that those people's brains are a lot more detail focused. And so it's almost like people with body image challenges have some sort of brain superpower that they can actually, naturally, they just focus on detail. And that's a fantastic and amazing thing. But when it's turned against yourself, to criticize yourself, to compare, to pull yourself down, it becomes a problem.
I love what you're saying here, because, you know, redirecting that energy, right? Converting that negative energy or that harmful energy into something positive, and actually helping people cultivate like the superpower that they have. Yeah. Right? Like, wow. I mean, what new hobby could they pick up? What new discipline might they want to learn? What else is out there, right? Absolutely. Because when we're so body focused, our worlds are so painfully narrow. Yeah. Right? But you're saying, hey, you have this gift in your brain. Yeah. Let's like put it to work. Go live your life. Go do something really exciting. Like take this really special thing about your brain and use it to uplift. Right? Yeah. And
I always like to say, like, beware of someone that's recovered from body image challenges, because like you said, when someone's so focused on one part of their body or their life, their world gets very small. And so for myself, as I began to recover from body dysmorphic disorder, my world got bigger, and I've got this fire inside me now, Jennifer, and I'm just like, you can't stop me. Try me. Yeah. You can't. And I think people that have experienced their world being so small, they really have a fire inside, because they can see kind of the lie that they were living, or how they were just hoodwinked by this illusion. That I think when people, the way culture looks at body image today, I think there's probably a lot of people out there that have body image challenges, and maybe it bothers them to a degree, but not to the degree where it severely compromises the quality of their life. Yeah. And so I almost feel the saddest for those people, because they can always just be like, oh, it's just, I can just put it to the side. And so I think the people that have really struggled in their lives to the point where the quality of their life has been compromised, they're the ones that are going to be most motivated to do something about it, because they've lost everything. The people who are living in limbo land, a little bit dissatisfied, bothers them throughout the day, they're the people that I want to say, this is absolutely something you can change.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's such a great message. You used the word motivated, and actually I was sitting here thinking I wanted to ask you about motivation to kind of wrap up our discussion. What words can you offer to those who can really relate to everything that you're saying and need a little motivation? Yeah, I think I remember myself, the biggest thing in my step to recovering from body image challenges was this nagging thought of, what if I'm right?
and all the therapists are telling me it's not a body problem, it's a body image problem. And the thing that got in the way of my motivation is like, well, what if it is a body problem? Like, what if I am a freak and I get 20 years down the track and then I realize everyone's actually been laughing at me behind my back? And so what I would say to you is, let's, again, two theories, split things into two things. Is that theory A is that you've been treating it this whole time as if it's a body problem, as if you're the problem, and you're still here. It hasn't worked. If that had worked, it would have worked years ago. And so I would say, just for 3 months, would you be willing to entertain the idea that it could be a body image problem, or it could be a brain problem, a perception problem? And if you're willing to just try that for 3 months, work with a therapist who knows what they're doing with body image challenges, I can guarantee you at the end of 3 months, I would imagine that you're going to be feeling better. If you're not, you can always go back to treating it as if it was a you problem, a body problem. But be willing to suspend judgment for a set period of time, mark it in your calendar and just say, hey, for 3 months, I'm going to just work on the assumption that it is a brain problem.
Nice.
And I think people will really start to see some differences, and a culture problem.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole other show.
Isn't it?
Yes. Good. Nice. Well, if people want to learn more about you, learn more about your work, reach out to you, how can they find you? Great
question. So I've got a company called Recovered Living, and it's all about working with people with eating disorders, with body image challenges, and really I just want help. I just want to help people be free in their bodies. So recoveredliving.com, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. More than happy to connect.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time and sharing your brilliance. And thank you, everyone, for watching this episode of Real Body Talk. If you like it, please share it with your friends. Let other people know about our show, Real Body Talk, right here on MLTV. I'll see you next time. Thank you.